Welcome to my first ever versus video, where I pit my opinion of Ico against my opinion of Shadow of the Colossus on PS3 using the Ico and Shadow of the Colossus collection. I'm honestly not sure what the ratio is of people who prefer Ico over Shadow of the Colossus or vice versa, but I can say that although I did enjoy both games, for me, there is a definite preference, and that preference is Shadow of the Colossus. The game really is a remarkable experience. To give a little bit of background on how I played these games, I did play Shadow of the Colossus on PS2. I've never played Ico, or Ico, however it's supposed to be said, on the PS2. I didn't get a chance to play that until I got the collection for PS3. So did the fact that I played Shadow of the Colossus first influence my decision as to which one I like better? Well, maybe. I suppose I'm a little too biased to answer that question. What I can say is I find it interesting how when I put the disc in on PS3 and started it up and started playing, I know it's supposed to be updated high resolution, high definition graphics, but in my mind, this is how the PS2 version looked anyway. I didn't go back to the PS2 version right away and kind of compare, because aside from just a little bit more kind of a grain to the texture on the PS2, it already lives this way in my head, if that makes any sense at all. Basically, I'm allowing myself to be disillusioned to how good it actually looked on the PS2. Maybe. Like I said, I never actually went back to do a true comparison. But I like that image that I have in my head. Maybe I'll go back and look someday. As far as how well it plays just as well as it did on the PS2. And it really is a remarkable experience. And an emotional one too by the end. They did an amazing job conveying the emotion and thoughts of the characters, I think, with very little dialogue. The only dialogue that you hear is from this disembodied voice, really, and a couple of characters that show up in the cutscenes. And maybe what makes it so interesting is that maybe they don't convey what they're thinking very well, and maybe they leave that up to you to kind of figure it out, so you're filling in the plot holes yourself, but you're happy to do so. It's not like one of those things where you kind of go, oh, what's going on? You can say, oh, I know what's going on. This is what's happening. And I think it's a great example of how an interesting story can be delivered without having endless dialogue and cutscenes that amount to a longer running time than actual gameplay. In addition to that, the game is backed up with some great gameplay. Each level is designed to be part adventure, part platformer, part puzzle game, and all of the elements are done very well and come together for a dramatic experience. Because as I climb these colossi, desperately trying to reach its weak point, I can't recall ever holding on to a controller so tight, replicating my desire to not let go. And it wasn't even just the first time playing it. Second time around as well, I found myself doing the same thing. The environment, the gameplay style, the colossi you face, almost everything about the game comes together so perfectly, except the controls and camera every now and then. It's nothing too serious, but occasionally you end up jumping someplace you didn't mean to jump, or I had trouble getting my guy to climb up something exactly the way I wanted him to climb, and sometimes the camera gets in the way as well, making it difficult to see. But it's not something that's getting in the way all the time, and it's definitely forgivable considering the experience the rest of the game gives you. So why do I like this game more than Ico? I'm going to call it Ico. If it's wrong, blame it on my accent. Well, with Ico you get a similar method of storytelling, but to me it really did feel like the predecessor to Shadow of the Colossus. The environment you're in is this huge castle or walled city, I guess you could call it. But in Shadow of the Colossus, it's even bigger. The puzzles in Shadow of the Colossus did feel a little bit more like puzzles requiring problem solving. With Ico, there's much less of those puzzle-solving, platforming, adventure gameplay elements. it's definitely toned down, or I guess I should say in Shadow of the Colossus they really amped it up from Ico. The puzzles in Ico, well, some of them don't even really feel like puzzles. I mean, when you're sitting there wondering what to do next, it seemed like the solution was, did you see that ladder in the corner? It's kind of hard to see there. It's kind of in the dark a little bit, but you found it. Good job puzzle solving. It's like it's not a puzzle. It's just more of what's the only possible thing you can do next. That's not the case for the entire game, but I found that was the case more often than it should have been. Because it's a slow-paced game, and I'm not coming down on it for the pace of the game. That's part of what makes it special. It's more calming and thoughtful than slow. But when it came down to the parts where you had to jump and swing on chains and things like that, even that felt unexciting, which isn't really what I think platforming in a game should feel like. Then there's the combat. There's no huge real boss fights except until the very end of the game. Along the way you're going to face these shadow minion things that keep trying to get the girl that's with you through most of the game that you're trying to protect. But that's kind of uninteresting as well. I mean, they're there more of a nuisance than to provide decent action in the game. Sure, sometimes once they grab her and they go to take her down this shadow hole thing that they crawled out of, that can raise your heartbeat a little bit as you race to get over there, but generally speaking, the combat did make me feel more like, oh, okay, more of these guys, I guess I'll get rid of them, than it did, fight time! The relationship between Ico and the girl, Yorda, I think her name is, that you're trying to protect, again, through most of the game, is fitting. I wouldn't say it's overly engaging, but it's fitting. The feeling that I got from these two is Ico's younger than her by a few years. She's maybe like 14 and he's maybe like 10 or something like that. I never really looked it up to figure out what their ages are, but that's just the feeling I get. And they do kind of project that very well. Ico seems like he's a young boy that knows what his duty should be and gets a sense of chivalry and need to protect this girl, but kind of awkward at the same time with it, especially when they're running together, because you'll often have to hold her hand and pull her along. And I just love when, at first, he grabs her hand and starts running, and she kind of gets jerked along a little bit, and you can tell it's not a smooth start that they both kind of take off together from, which is endearing at first, but after a while it kind of moves to the humorous side. They try and create a sense of tension as well, because there'll be often gaps that you'll have to jump across, and then you'll have to convince her to jump across to you, and she'll just miss and grab onto the ledge, so you grab her and you help pull her up. Again, it provides a little bit of drama the first couple times, but it happens so often, by the end you're just kind of like, okay, come on, pick her up, let's go, come on. And now, I don't have anything against most of the game being an escort mission. That's the point, and for the most part they work that mechanic very well. But oh my goodness, it would be helpful if the girl wasn't so unnecessarily useless. And what I mean by that is, there's no enemies around. None. You're not protecting her from anybody. You're just trying to get her to come with you. And then you get to a ladder. And there's quite a few really tall ladders in the game. And she takes forever to climb these things, whether going up or down. So slow. It just brings it down to a snail's pace for no real good reason. I mean, I guess you're trying to show that she needs protection or she's weakened or whatever. It didn't really feel that necessary to me to slow her down that much. And sometimes she'll start climbing up and then decide to stop and then start climbing back down, and you can't get her to change her mind again to go back up, and little things like that's just frustrating. They're both games where the developers seem to wanted to provide a unique experience and make the core of the game about the experience you have with it, not just the fun you have in running around and doing whatever the main mechanic of the game is. Ico does succeed in that. It's a unique title, it deserves playing, and it is good. I would say it's a good game. I'm not sure if I would give it all the praise that some of its fans give it. Shadow of the Colossus, although a prequel in the story, is definitely in my eyes the next step up in gameplay. Not only does it provide that unique experience, it makes it much more exciting and much more engaging. And that's why it gets my pick for the better game.